take a little bit of time to explain to you what is happening in the global infrastructure market today. I will explain why blockchains are so important and what kind of breakthroughs they are capable of providing to society. And then third, I will give you a very quick glimpse at what we are doing, my partners and I, about this opportunity. So let's start first with the clicker working. Yeah, here we go. So here are the three key drivers. This is not showing up here. What happened? Let me try this. No. Help. I'm trying to go forward. It goes back, but not forward. Okay, perfect. You have the magic touch, my friend. Okay. Okay, here are the three key drivers. First, I think this will not come as a surprise to you that there is a massive deficiency of infrastructure. So if you talk to any finance minister, any leaders, number one thing they talk about is that there is a lack of infrastructure which is choking global growth. The developed economies like United States, Europe, frankly, have been living off of the infrastructure that was financed many decades ago. And then the new economies in Asia, Latin America, many other parts of the world, they desperately need new infrastructure to continue the growth path that they're on. So we have a big deficiency of infrastructure. The second big driver is what is called rural to urban migration. So you have lots and lots of people moving from rural areas to cities as globalization takes place. When these people come to the cities, cities have to figure out how to deal with them, how to house them, how to provide services for them. All of that requires infrastructure. So that's the second big driver. Third, again, no surprise, global climate change. So we have tremendous amount of change happening with respect to global climate change. So there are two types of investments required. One, how can we at least slow down the negative changes in the climate? That requires new kind of infrastructure. And of course, once we have realized that we have passed a certain level of change on the global climate, then you have to prepare communities, cities to actually adapt to that change. All of that requires more and more infrastructure. So this is what is driving the global infrastructure market in developed as well as in developing countries, much more so in the fast developing emerging economies. So we come to the challenge of financing infrastructure. So there are three key things I want you to remember from this. One, governments are just simply not able to finance the kind of infrastructure they need with public budgets. I have, including the government of China, I've advised Chinese Ministry of Finance, their planning ministry, China XM. I think I've worked in probably 20 of the biggest metro markets in China. I can tell you at the local government level, central government level, even China does not have the capital it needs to finance infrastructure just through the public budget. So there's a need to get private capital, and there's a need to get what are called public-private partnerships. So that brings us to the second point. The public-private partnerships have also not been able to deliver. So less than 10% of the infrastructure investments around the world are today financed with public-private partnerships. Not nearly enough. And one of the big reasons for that is that in public-private partnerships, you are almost guaranteed to have the public P, which is the government, involved in the financing of the infrastructure. And I'll talk about that later, why that's so detrimental to the scale-up of this concept of public-private partnerships. And then the third thing, you I think know, but just to summarize, so what that leaves us with is an infrastructure market that is very illiquid. So you invest today, the projects last 15 years, 20 years, you have to wait that long. So it basically makes it investable for a very small set of investors, like pension funds, other institutional investors, who can afford to park money for a long period of time, and people like you and me probably don't get involved in it because it's too illiquid. It depends too much upon government's decisions. So today they're happy with you, and tomorrow the government changes, and then your investment becomes very risky. So these are the kinds of problems that new technologies, particularly blockchains, are very well equipped to solve. And that's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about. There we go. So the first thing is I want you to understand when I talk about technology, there are two types of impact. One is how infrastructure is provided to people like you and me in our homes or wherever we live. And the second thing is how infrastructure is financed. These are two very distinct things, and there is a technological impact on both of them. So first part on this side is the disruptive technologies that are now coming out. These are not things that will happen in the future. These are not concepts. These are now very commercial technologies funded by some of the best venture capital firms in the world, and they are now coming through. Many of them are based on the big ticket technologies like artificial intelligence, IoT, renewable energy. So what we're now seeing are applications of these big, massive technological changes to infrastructure. And I'll give you some examples of what they look like. Second part is the role of blockchains. And here I'll explain to you why blockchains, when you put infrastructure on a blockchain, you have the opportunity to change the way infrastructure is financed. Very, very big deal. Very, very transformative change that is taking place and will take off in the coming years, and you will see that perhaps that would be one of the biggest push for our community, the crypto community, the tokenization community, to really benefit from, because this is the kind of stuff that touches real world, common people. You don't have to be a crypto investor or tech person to be able to understand if your infrastructure can be provided cheaply, more transparently, with more accountability. You'd say, whatever technology that is, I'm for it. So this is why I'm doing this talk, and you'll see this is why we've actually invested a lot of our professional experience and capital into setting up a fund behind this. So here's just another touch at what tokenization means. And you may have heard of the concept of securitization, used very frequently in the infrastructure world. There's a big difference between securitization and tokenization. I wanted to just point that out. Securitization is, I have money coming to me. Let's say I own a toll road, and the toll road earns a certain amount of revenues every quarter, every month. And I basically securitize my future cash flow into a bond or a loan. That's called securitization. It's very different from tokenization, because in tokenization, you not only can do a security token and have similar method to a securitization, but with tokenization, you can also include services that you will receive in the future, which securitization does not include. And perhaps most importantly at the end, tokenization can happen in real time, today. It's not something that is always for the future. So the services that you receive today can be tokenized, and the exchange can happen on the blockchain in real time. Here is a theoretical but very, very practical also explanation for why infrastructure is perhaps one of the best fits for tokenization of almost any other industry. There are 4 key ingredients that go into a good token or tokenomics model. First, you must have cash flows that are within that are repeating. So repeating within certain timelines as well. So for example, your gas bill is, let's say, $40 a month. You don't have a situation where you pay gas bill 1 month and then the next time your bill comes is 5.5 months later. No, you get very, very clear repeating cash flows. So every month you have a bill. And your bill doesn't go from $40 to $550. It kind of stays within a certain radius. These are very, very critical things for a good token mechanism. Third thing, the substitutability is fairly difficult. So you can't just willy-nilly change from this gas company to another gas company. You may do it once or twice, but you will very quickly run out of gas companies. So that's another very critical ingredient for a tokenized structure. And last, perhaps most importantly, lots of engineers in the room here, lots of technical people, when we set up a smart contract and we put anything on a blockchain, it takes quite a bit of doing to do that. And especially when you're talking about retail customers, you have to get people comfortable with it, you have to get governments comfortable with it, you have to change the entire business model. You better be doing it for a lot of customers. Or if you have only hundreds of customers, each one of those hundreds of customers had better be producing revenues of millions of dollars, because the transaction cost otherwise would be very high. In infrastructure, we're talking about not just hundreds or thousands, we're talking hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of customers. So when you set up this thing, and we set up an infrastructure program on a blockchain, the unit cost, the marginal cost of adding new people becomes very low. You can do a power project here, or gas project here, and if it works, you can take that entire framework and move it to another project in some other city. So the economies of scale and the economies of scope are very, very critical, especially as we move forward with this tokenization concept and we have listed tokens on different exchanges being traded. You are going to need volume. Volume of trade, and volume of trade is what will bring the unit cost down, so that the real efficiencies of using blockchains can be realized, in addition to transparency and everything else that we talk about so far. Here's an explanation for why blockchains are so important for the financing of infrastructure. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm a power company, and I provide power to, let's say, this part of town. And everything is good. I have a license from the government. I have a concession to provide power to this part of town. And let's say very soon there's a new industrial park that comes up just across the street. A new town starts to develop. And there's a new community coming up here. And I feel like, look, I know this community, I know this area. I've done my assessment. These people have the capacity to pay. They will be great customers. So I can apply to the government, get a concession, get a license to serve this part of town. All good so far. Now I go to my bank, or I go to the capital market, and I say I would like to raise money to serve this. First thing they will say to me is, that's great, but can you get us a counter guarantee from the government? Because, these are public people, these are retail customers, the credit risk is pretty high. So we would like to have a counter guarantee from the government. And the minute they say that, they've just added 2-3 years to my project's life, a lot of bureaucracy, and depending upon the country, probably corruption. This is why the public-private partnership model has not been able to scale up, because the government, when the government gets involved in financing of infrastructure, that is not the right role for them. It brings nothing but problems. So with the blockchain, same power company, I now say, you know what, these people, I already looked, they have the capacity to pay. I have the capacity to provide them a service. I'm just going to issue tokens. I don't need to go to the government for a guarantee. I don't need to go to my bank. I don't need to go to capital markets. I provide service to the people. I issue tokens. They can even buy the same tokens, because what is a token? Token is a promise of a service in the future. So a customer here could say, you know, this token pays for X kilowatt of energy. So they could say, you know, I think the price of energy is going to go up. I'm just going to buy the token. And this way, I can either pay with my token, or I can sell my token and pay the bill through my smart contract. So this is why the blockchain introduction into the infrastructure field is going to absolutely revolutionize the way infrastructure is financed. And hopefully, we can then start to put the government back into the right role for the government, which is issuing licenses, making sure that public safety is taken care of, not be involved in the financing. Let me just give you a quick glimpse of what we are doing. So this is Infratech Capital. I'm the CEO and founder of Infratech Capital. We're the first global infratech fund. We are set up to take advantage and to expand the footprint of technology in the global infrastructure market. We invest equity in infrastructure companies that are using technology in their infrastructure offering. And we are very, very committed to impact, particularly social and environmental impact. My partners and I all come with this impact background. Let me just show you very quickly the rest of our team. You may recognize some of them, but we have amongst us about $15 to $16 billion worth of investment experience in the infrastructure market, particularly in emerging markets. We have probably more than 200 to 250 projects that we have done in our careers. We've tried to combine the best of the infrastructure world and the tech world. So we have the ability to deal with both types of investments. And perhaps most importantly, we have been advising governments at the very highest levels. So finance ministers, energy ministers, transport ministers, particularly, again, in the emerging markets. So a lot of us come from the World Bank, International Finance Corporation, but then also investment banks. As you can see, my background, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. We have Mark Kulak from Microsoft. We have a full-on PhD economist because we want to be absolutely certain about the impact side of things. And then you can see the board of advisors. We have also, I think, pretty much of an A team, we'd like to think. Macquarie, for those of you who don't know, is the biggest player in the private equity market in infrastructure. They probably have something like $1 trillion under management. Brock Pierce, some of you would know. Cesar Purisima was the finance secretary under President Aquino, not some political hack. This guy was the Asian finance minister of the year during his tenure. And then Vijay Pattabhiraman just left the JP Morgan Private Equity Fund for Asia, which he led for, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years. So this is the whole story. I hope that this was useful to you. And most importantly, I hope that you can now understand why this whole tokenization concept is important, and it will become extremely important and mainstream once we start applying this technology to real assets, real life things. So no longer, I know a lot of the conference, a lot of discussions, we've been talking about a lot of ventures that are by the crypto community, for the crypto community, for a lot of very, very important things. But this is sort of the break-off moment where we start to go from just our community to the mass market. And infrastructure, real estate, these are the kinds of assets that are going to absolutely revolutionize the use of tokens. Thank you very much. I'm right on time.
Yeah, I think there's time to take some more questions,
sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, some more questions, please, to Kamran. About winemaking or infrastructure, blockchain, whatever you want. No more questions? Yeah, that's a question.
Sir.
You get the mic. Oh, the lady gives you the mic. That's much better.
Hi, my name is Juan. I would like to know if you can tell us about some other use cases of infratech on tokenization on top of the one that you mentioned.
Yeah. Happy to. So I don't like to name companies because I don't want to advertise or make any representation. First, on the tech side, there are a number of very interesting examples. So let me just rocket through a few just to give you a sense. So we have a company that used to make lights, public lights, like street lights. They went from street lights to smart lights. And they went from smart lights to IoT-based lights. So you can now imagine a very old-fashioned, boring light manufacturer is now the guy who understands and has data on an entire road because each light talks to the other light. And now on that entire road, anything that happens, they have the information. Whether it's Tesla wanting to have information nodes for its navigation system, leak detection underneath, waste management, parking, you see how that goes, right? We have a company that is using AI to do desalination. So desalination is a very, very important thing for water-scarce communities, but it's very expensive. It's expensive because the energy cost is very high. The energy cost is very high is because we essentially use a burner to make the water go through the purification process. We have no ability to adjust the heat. So we now have AI engine in there that figures out how much heat is needed at what stage of the purification. And with that, they've reduced the energy cost by almost 35–40%, and then they capture the heat as well. We have a company that does waste to energy. Again, not used to be very boring stuff, but these guys have a very, very advanced electrolysis system. So they can go to almost 1400 degrees Celsius heat without fire. Okay? And this is, all of these are 4 or 5 years of research developed in very well-funded university programs that these things are coming on. And they have, clients, they have customers. What they haven't gotten is the big scale with government contracts. That's why, that's our business model, to actually help these kinds of companies expand. And we're ourselves in a fundraise mode. So the idea is, as with everybody else, we're flying the plane as we're building it. So we're raising capital, and we're also putting together a pipeline of deals. So as and when we raise money, we can start executing. So I hope it gives you some sense. But the tokenization idea follows through with all of these companies. So it's going to be the go-to option for infrastructure companies. I can guarantee you that.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks.
Any more questions? Oh, I'm done. I think Rodolfo's happy if we continue, right? Okay.
Sounds great.
We should talk.
We should.
I have a project where it might be